Hello and greetings to anyone watching this presentation. I am Vaishnav Negi and I'll be presenting the paper titled Deep Learning and Linguistic Feature-Based Automatic Multiple Choice Question Generation from Text. The authors of this paper are Mr. Rajat Agarwal, who is pursuing his PhD from IIIT Delhi, myself Vaishnav Negi, a recent graduate from Graphicare University, Dehradun, Akshat Kalra, a current student in Core, Roorkee, and Dr. Ankush Mittal, who has been our mentor and guide, and he is the founder of Raman Classes, Roorkee. So let's move on to our organization of the presentation. So today, first we'll discuss the motivation, then we'll formally describe the problem statement, then we'll look at the related works and prior works that inspired us, and then we'll look at some important observations from these prior works that we were able to deduce, and then we'll look at some challenges that presented themselves during the formulation of the pipeline and the workflow that we ourselves came up with. And as part of the pipeline and workflow, we'll see the summarization and preprocessing first, then we'll look at text simplification, then we'll look at the SYNCQG question answer pair generator, and then we'll look at the process of distractor generation, and finally we'll look at the process of paraphrasing. Then we'll discuss the experimentation and the results that we achieved through those experimentations. Finally, we'll conclude the paper. Let's move ahead. So firstly, talking about our motivations for the paper. First is that the accessibility of education has increased exponentially. The number of students is rising, necessitating the development of e-learning technologies and paradigms. This poses a challenge for the people involved in assessment due to the compounded effect of an overwhelming number of examinees to be assessed at once, where having the same question base for all of them might encourage unfair practices like cheating and copying from others during the examination. Secondly, a lack of novelty and variation in the questions compared to the prior assessments can cause a drop in the difficulty level of the exam. Then finally, it is a very tedious and taxing task to manually delve into the literature available for a given subject and meticulously formulate a sufficient number of questions. Moving on, you observe that the questions can be broadly categorized into subjective or essay type and objective or multiple choice questions. Now, since MCQs are easier to administer and evaluate than essay type questions, they are explicitly used in mass testing and online testing scenarios. Automatically generated questions till now lack the contextual depth of manually prepared questions. The questions might be grammatical and syntactical error-free, but they still have semantic shortcomings that make them unsuitable to be administered for evaluation. Other such challenges still persist in the field that make this problem a riveting and one worth exploring. Now, we will formally describe the problem statement. The problem statement is, given an input text in form of a PDF file, the proposed workflow provides a set of MCQs with appropriate allied distractors and paraphrase questions employing linguistic features and deep learning techniques. Here is an overview of the system. Moving on. Now we'll look at some of the related works that help us to develop a base for our own problem, And then moving on, there are these 5 important papers that we came across that inspired our work. First is Dhole in 2020. They gave a rule-dependent framework called SYNCQG for producing questions by outlining brief answers using relations found in dependency trees, semantic roles, identifiable predicate verb arguments, recognizing named entities, state of various actors over time, and by verb-specific semantic roles assigned to the participants. The next was Bhatia in 2013. They created a set of reference questions by replacing the WH phrases with the first option in the existing MCQs. The patterns from this set are then used to find potential sentences and keys from a given text input. For distractor generation, an attribute set is created using tabular data available for key on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is again searched for related candidates from the same category as the key using the modifiers from the attribute set. Then Majumdar in 2015 improved upon the sentence selection approach used by Bhatia and others using various pre-processing techniques like co-reference resolution, converting compound complex sentences into simple sentences, and topic modeling to filter domain text containing relevant keywords. Santana Vijay and others in 2017 collected relevant text for a user-specified domain, that is, user would provide the input for what domain they have to collect the test for. A Fireflies-based preference learning summarization filters informative, complete sentences from the collected text. Keys are found using POS tagging and a preference mechanism for various POS tags identified. Distractors are produced using metrics of similarity, namely hyponyms and hyponyms, which in turn are found using Wikipedia. Fato in 2014 focuses on semantic role labels and named entities in the sentences to determine their suitability to form question stems and then identify keywords in the stem obtained. Stems are stored in a database with their associated keywords. Distractors for specific keys are generated using character and term-based string similarity measures with remaining keywords in the database. Moving on, we'll look at some important observations from prior works. So we identified some generic steps. We identified some generic steps for MCQ generation by studying these prior works. So first one is pre-processing. It includes techniques like co-reference resolution, word sense disambiguation, and text simplification, etc. that makes it more suitable for the upcoming steps. Second is sentence selection. Sentence selection means that we have to identify the stem from which interrogate questions are to be framed. Now, third is key selection. Key selection is identifying that part of the stem that might act as the correct answer to the question that we will frame from the stem. Then is question formation. Question formation is the process of converting the stem statement to an interrogative sentence statement. This can either be done by replacing the key in stem by a blank or changing the sentence structure to an interrogating WH form. Now, penultimate step is distractor generation. Distractor generation would include finding words that are similar to the correct answer or key but are not exactly the same as keys so that there's no ambiguity about the final answer. And post-processing would include steps that would help us find errors in the proposed MCQs or questions that are formed and their distractors so that a better outcome can be obtained. Moving on to the challenges that we faced. So questions can be formed for all the sentences in input. Filtering out relevant sentences from the input text is very important. Some sentences might not provide complete information or they might not have good context, so we have to filter out these kind of sentences. Second is the sentences have to be factual and atomic, complete in themselves. So pre-processing of the filtered out sentences will be required. Sentences must provide one piece of information and they should provide it completely. That is very important. That is what atomic means. The sentences should be complete in themselves. So third is selection and formulation of appropriate techniques to generate semantically correct WH questions. Then we have to find words appropriate enough to act as distractors for a given correct answer to a question. And finally, we have to generate distractors for multi-word answers, which is a challenge. Moving on to the workflow and pipeline. The workflow can be broadly divided in 3 steps. The first one is the pre-trained DL state-of-the-art model first summarizes the text paragraph to get the relevant information. Second is the linguistic features are used to generate question stems and answer key pairs. Then third is the distractor generation using the key or correct answer. DL-based paraphrasing models are used to augment the MCQ dataset with similar types of questions and difficulty levels. So we have also used paraphrasing to augment our question set. So this is how the pipeline is picturized. Plain text, BERT extractive summarizer, co-reference resolution and text simplification. Then there's SYNCQG, which will give us question answer pairs, which will be provided to T5 transformer for paraphrasing and sensitive vec for distractor generation. And finally we'll get our MCQs. So moving on, we look at the summarization and pre-processing step. So we are using BERT extractive summarizer or bidirectional encoder representation from transformers. It was provided by Google and it can do various NLP tasks including question answering. It parses the meaning by consolidating the relevant sentences. It also helps us reduce the number of irrelevant sentences, which is enormous as a large number of sentences are retrieved from the input text. BERT embeddings generate complex sentences since during summarization sentences are selected based solely on the extracted text, and sometimes these are difficult to create and some sentences are off track in between. So they must undergo a specific processing. To solve this issue, the question generation system uses text simplification and co-reference resolution. Now, co-reference resolution is the task of determining whether all phrases in the text refer to the same thing. For this task, neural coref, a spacey pipeline extension, is employed. It annotates and resolves co-reference clusters using a neural network. The example for the same is provided in this illustration. Please review it at your own convenience. Now, the second pre-processing step is text simplification. Now, text simplification plays a crucial role as sentences produced from Word are complex, and using text simplification breaks them down into simple sentences that are conducive for upcoming processes. Figure below demonstrates the broad internal subtasks employed during sentence simplification. Now, multilingual unsupervised sentence simplification is employed for the task of text simplification. Now, MUS works without labeled data. Rather than using only the simplification data, MUS trains models using sentence-level paraphrase data, which exploits unsupervised pre-training and controllable generation mechanisms at inference time to adjust attributes like lexical complexity and length. Furthermore, semantic sentence embeddings are being used to mine paraphrase data in any language from Common Crawl, thus obviating the label data requirement. A SYNCQG QA pair generator. It uses syntactic and shallow semantic rules for question generation framework to convert sentences into interrogative form. The SYNCQG transforms declarative sentences into question-answer pairs using universal dependency, shallow semantic parsing, lexical resources, and custom rules. SYNCQG generates numerous question-answer pairs from a single statement. It modifies the argument of each predicate into the form of semantic rules, according to a predefined set of rules. It also identifies the named entity and other generic entities that are part of the statement. We discard some of the question-answer pairs as their answers contain lengthy sentences that are not suitable for distractor generation. Here is an example of SYNCQG at work. The statement 100-meter race was won by Usain Bolt by a margin of 5 seconds in 2008 is rearranged as by how much 100-meter race was won by Usain Bolt in 2008. So the answer is by a margin of 5 seconds. Another example is Nathuram Godse murdered Mahatma Gandhi. After application of verbnet parse, it will identify that who is not alive, and the answer will be Mahatma Gandhi. A distractor generation. In multiple choice question, distractors represent incorrect answers. The task is to obfuscate the correct answer to make the examinee think about the study material. This is done by choosing the word most similar to the key. That is, the words that are conceptually close or belong to the same category as the key. SYNCQG is used for the generation of distractors. And to predict words associated with the focus word, neural networks are trained with millions of sentences. SYNCQG generates a fixed-size vector representation for each word so that it can quickly find the corresponding vector that behaves as a distraction. Here's an illustration of how SYNCQG finds how close a word is to the key so it can act as a distractor. Moving on to the final step and the ultimate step of our model is paraphrasing. Now, paraphrasing is the task of changing a sentence's form while still retaining the original meaning. A question can be asked in different ways to better comprehend the knowledge of a student. Sometimes it is advantageous to use paraphrased questions so that we have a different set of similar questions with equal difficulty. We are using the text-to-text transformer T5 model to achieve this. Unlike BERT models that only either produce a class label or a span of an input, T5 input and output are always text strings. Now about the experimentation. For evaluation of the system, we chose various texts from high school social science textbooks and formulated questions based on this summary. The text and the allied question sets are then passed on to human evaluators who are asked to read the text and evaluate if questions present in the set are acceptable or not. Evaluators are only asked to mark questions as pass or fail based on their understanding of passage provided. But at the same time, directions are also provided to the evaluators to be mindful of factors like grammar, semantics, contextual closeness to input text, distractor quality, difficulty of the questions, and naturalness while passing their judgment. A Google form is used to collect responses from the evaluators. These responses are analyzed and the success rate was calculated for each assessor as follows. Success percentage is number of questions passed upon total number of questions that were given to them. These are some of the questions that we provided to the assessors, and their outputs are recorded in this table. Please review them at your own convenience by pausing the video. Results. 50 human assessors participated in the evaluation, wherein they are provided a PDF file containing a text from a high school history textbook about World War II in Germany, followed by 25 MCQs from the same text. The average success rate for the above passage is 77.14%. So, as a conclusion, our work discusses some recent approaches for automatic MCQ generation and delivers a pipeline for the same. Most of the prior papers used blank question types as they are easier to generate and yield higher accuracy, but we generate simple interrogative questions or WH questions type MCQs. This helps not only the educators in the evaluation process, but also the students to learn better by getting instant questions to challenge themselves to improve their understanding and retention of a text. After a thorough analysis of the evaluation results, we analyzed the cases of repeated failures and observed that the accuracy of the model can be improved further by better pre-processing of the input text and enhancing the SYNCQG model further to better recognize more varieties of sentence structures. The summarization can also be improved to recognize more informative and complete sentences. Also, the model can be augmented by adding the functionality to create distractors for long sentences. These are the references to all the works that we used in the paper. Thank you, and pardon any mistakes I might have made during the presentation. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the paper.